Thick Walker. The weather's changing in New Zealand. Tell me about it. It's autumn time.
Autumn, yep. Summer came and went as it always does, way too fast. And so, yeah, we're into autumn and driving home a couple of weeks ago. You have that sudden moment when you're looking at the trees and you go, "Oh, damn, they're changing colour." So, yep, we're into autumn. Still
And has it
lovely
been,
weather.
yeah, has it been a good summer in New Zealand?
Yeah, no, we've had a cracker. In fact, a lot of farmers would be, we had a great lead into Christmas, and it's got real dry in the latter parts of it. So it's pretty dry around the place at the moment. But yeah, I'd say most people were pretty happy with the amount of sunshine hours we had, and didn't have too much wind, and it's plenty of good beach days. So it's been not a bad summer.
Nice. And from a business point of view, what areas of the economy are doing well in New Zealand and what's struggling?
I think ag, agriculture and horticulture are doing okay at the moment. The dairy payout's looking pretty strong. Um, and meat, beef and lamb are going well. Wool's it's normal, depressed kind of place. But in forestry, is doing better. Still, it's not great, but doing better. But they tend to roll in their own cycles. I think the international commodity cycle, they seem to run in their own circle. But the New Zealand economy at the moment, I think we're in the new year. We're starting to see that interest rates coming down, inflation's coming down. I think there's still a lot of caution. I know there's a lot of projects that have been sort of signed off and ready to go, but just haven't had that final approval to get going. So I think the whole country's in a little bit of, wait and see. Probably doesn't help when you have a couple of big Chinese ships parked off the border at the moment, and a little bit of action in Washington. It sort of, doesn't spook anyone by any means, but it just everyone's just remains cautious. So I think the latter half of this year, I think we'll be starting to feel like there's more signs of light. I think it's
Yeah.
certainly there, but
So, as you know, I lived in New Zealand for 15 years, and it's a place very dear to my heart. And people always say that, Ireland and New Zealand are exactly the same. They're very similar countries, and they are in some respects. But for those who have spent a long time in both countries, they'll know that there's huge differences. And I was interested in your opinion on self-sufficiency. So here in Ireland, we are very heavily reliant on income from large corporations who have set up their head offices here, like Google and so on. Is New Zealand in a similar situation, or would you regard New Zealand as a more self-sufficient economy?
I think we would love to have some of that big capital come here. I think we're self-sufficient for no other reason than we just don't have enough capital. I think here in the country, I think we're fundamentally two islands in the bottom of the world, in the middle of nowhere, sitting on two tectonic plates. She's got some risk down here, and I think we're self-sufficient purely because not a lot of big business really is parked up down here. So we're probably our biggest risk down here is always that we're totally reliant on the global shipping networks to actually call in here and pick up our produce. We like in the dairy industry, we wouldn't consume 10% of what we manufacture. So we have to export. That's what keeps us afloat. So we're really reliant on shipping lines coming in here, and if they decided, look, we love you guys, but if you could get your produce across to Australia, we'll pick it up there. That would be much appreciated. It would put some real pressure on this country. So we're self-sufficient in a lot of regards. Like we don't, all of our electricity and gas. We're obviously hydro and wind and coal, but and we bring in our own. We bring in probably 90% of our oil, but um, you know, as far as self-sufficient goes, we're completely reliant on the global economy. We have to trade. We have to trade a lot. We probably don't have enough people here. I think we're sitting 5 million plus people nowadays, but it's not that long ago we were 3. But we could probably do with 12 really to generate a bit of our own economy. So yeah, we're a trader. We have to trade. We're not self sufficient.
Yeah, I heard a remarkable statistic a few years ago of all the dairy products that are exported around the world, like milk and casein and milk powder and so on. New Zealand accounts for roughly 35% of the entire export trade.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that
I think
incredible?
it is incredible. I think what's traded globally is only like about maybe 5 to 10% of all dairy products are actually traded beyond borders because most countries consume their own goods. But for of all the export nations, we're absolutely the largest player in it. But it's still a small chunk of the global dairy market. But we're absolutely influential in it. And that what is traded. You know, right or wrong. We're a fairly cost efficient producer of it. We just have to move it a long way to all these markets. Everywhere we go is a long way.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the ships, the Chinese ships rolling around the waters there. And, when we listen to the news reports coming out of the United States and so on, a lot of people might have the impression that New Zealand is a bit of a bolt hole. So if there's any issues going on in the United States, particularly amongst the wealthy folks, they just buy themselves a place in New Zealand and go settle there in splendid isolation. Is New Zealand living in splendid isolation, or is it really in a position of threat, shall we say?
I think it was more significant. I think most of us, we're called Kiwis, and I think we're called Kiwis for a reason. We're just not used to having any kind of predator. We kind of naively walk around the country like all's good and no one's ever going to touch us. But I think that was a pretty strong signal, you know, by China just to say, we can come down there if we want. And I think, even probably majority of the population here still probably haven't really clicked onto it. But yeah, I don't know if anyone. I think it's the dawn of a new age for us down here, and the fact that we aren't a bolt hole. We're only just around the corner. Really, they came down here with. They had 3 ships on top of the water, and there was probably a couple under the water, and we
Yeah,
don't know if they were in our economic zone or not. Really, so there was some pretty loud signalling going across there. Yeah, so we are a long way. We think we're in a bolt hole, but I think last week's news probably proved to most of us that we're actually not.
yeah. One of the similarities that people often draw between Ireland and New Zealand is that it comes from the fact that we are both so-called little brothers of Australia and the United Kingdom, respectively. Now, here in Ireland, we'll have a different opinion on that.
Yeah.
Does New Zealand have that kind of baggage attached to it, or do people not really care about Australia being next door?
Uh, Australia is a massively powerful influencer on our nation. I think. I think what's it, 24 million people. So and it's just across the ditch, as we say. And it's a powerful force. I think that like there's a big economy over there, so we are losing a lot of people to Australia. Just the grass may not necessarily be greener, but there's just a lot more paddocks for people to play in over there. There's just so much more activity going on that people are going. So I think there's obviously a great sporting rivalry. There's obviously a lot of banter that goes on between us on who owns the PAV and who owns Farlap, the racehorse, and all those kinds of things. But I think it's we're lucky to have a good relationship with Australia. I think I went there this time last year for a friend's 50th and came back going, wow, it's got its challenges like everywhere in the world, but there's a lot going on in Australia, and it's still some good opportunity there. And like I've been to Ireland probably 4 times now, and yeah, right, when you're flying in there, the clouds open up, and you're flying into the green Emerald Isle there. It does feel a lot like New Zealand. It certainly feels a lot like Taranaki from where I'm from, which is it's a very green province with the hedges and the dairy farms everywhere. It feels very homely going to Ireland, and I can sort of see why it's the states and Canada and Ireland and England and New Zealand and Australia. We kind of got these neighbours that yours has obviously got a lot more history with it with your neighbour than what ours is, but ours tends to be as we obviously fought together in a couple of wars, but other than that, it's mainly sporting rivalry and a little bit of economic tie together. But I think the best thing we could do as a country is probably, you know, continue to get closer, to them. They're,
Yeah,
that's the
economically, yeah,
purpose of that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Okay, interesting stuff. So you're a busy man. You've got lots
yeah,
on your plate at the moment. You're managing director of Container Space in New
yeah.
Zealand. So tell me a little bit about Container Space and how's everything going there?
Here's a container space is a business we purchased just about 2 years ago, and not a business that I'd had any experience in before, other than in a previous business we carted containers, but I'd never really thought too much about containers themselves. And when we were looking around at something to do, the business came up in front of us, and the first thing you thought is, who the heck buys containers? So that's basically what the business is. It's we buy and sell shipping containers, and we hire containers out. So a lot of people use them for projects, or just for inventory management, or the whole range of things. We sell a lot of containers for everyone, from everything from sports clubs looking for somewhere to store all their equipment safely and securely, for people for storage of furniture, for a guy that's his wife's told him he's got to get his collection of pinball machines out of the spare room, into that, to you name it, everything and anything. Swimming pools, we've just completed a swimming pool. So
So
people do.
for storing a swimming pool.
No, an actual, we cut a swimming pool. We cut a container down split it in half, and actually converted it into an actual swimming pool, which we deliver next week. So
Wow.
they're a fascinating bit of kit, really. They're in New Zealand, because we're such a big importer of finished products. So electronics and everything comes in containers. We export milk powder and logs and stuff like that, but we bring in far more containers with imported products than we actually export out. So for shipping lines, New Zealand can be a bit of a challenge. So obviously, a lot of ships will have containers when they get to port that may be no longer economically viable to take back out again. So they put those up for sale. They also may have just a whole lot of containers that may be sitting around for longer than they would like. So they might look to sell some containers, but also we also a lot of brand new containers come in that we build to order. The shipping lines use to come over, and so we can end up selling new containers here. So fundamentally, we're selling a surplus product for shipping. If they weren't being sold or disposed of, we'd have just acres and acres and acres of containers piling up. So they're a surplus product, and probably in the last 5 to 10 years, just they've got quite well priced, and people are using them for everything from storage, to building and converting for offices. It's a global phenomenon. It's not unique to New Zealand by
Yeah.
any stretch.
Yeah. So
Um,
let me, and please forgive the terrible pun, but let me unpack this for a second, right? So you're purchasing containers from where? Is it from China? Is that where they're all made?
yeah, so China would absolutely be the dominant manufacturer of containers, but also a lot of what we import comes from China as well. So a lot of the shipping lines are coming from China. So that's where a good chunk of the containers are coming from. Um, and so but we've got all the big shipping lines here, Maersk and Costco, and there's all those lines. And so they just make some calls with, they're just managing this massive big fleet of containers everywhere, and they'll look to go, well, these ones here are no longer productive, containers. It's time to sell them, or look, these things here have got no way out. And sometimes they'll send a ship in here and take, a big shipload of empty containers back out. But
Wow.
it's more often than not, they just look to move them, because if they're sitting here waiting for a load, they pay a daily rate to store those containers. And so, pretty quickly the costs start to be higher than the value of the container, so to speak. So they just, it's just some economic decisions, really. And then, so the demand here really nowadays is everything and anything. They're just a really cost effective solution for people. And I suppose when we bought the business, what we liked about it was that it had a hire fleet. So when that hire fleet is out in full, um, the business basically covers all its overhead and everything just through um, rentals. So we invested in a business that has a really low depreciating asset that earns dollars a day out working for you. So they're low maintenance and low depreciation and relatively low risk. So that was kind of the what we liked about it. What we when we purchased the business and we took over 1st of April 23, the economy had probably slowed at that point more than we realized at the time. When you look back and you go, oh, that was actually quite slow. You don't realize things are slowing down when you're there. So we bought a business having just come off the COVID high. So it had some pretty large sales and some good margins and bits and pieces. And then when we bought it, we bought the business based on a hire fleet working and all those kinds of bits and pieces. But pretty quickly over that first year, what we did learn was that the economy was absolutely slowing, and a lot of those containers that had been out on hire, whether they're for a business that was looking for surplus storage for inventory or for using on construction sites for storage of equipment and inventory on construction sites. A lot of those containers, as much as they weren't a big cost per day or per month, it was another line on their P&L. So, probably had 40% of the containers come home. So,
Yeah, wow.
and then as did every other fleet in the country. So suddenly what we've learnt was, a lot of all those containers came home, and everyone's looking to free up a bit of cash. So suddenly there's a whole lot more containers on the market for sale. So the price starts to drop. There's less demand. It was kind of a perfect storm last year. And so, it's a really interesting first 2 years to learn the game. But I think the other thing that we underestimated when we purchased the business was just the absolute power of marketing. um, we built the business when we purchased it was off a sole trader. He built up a team around him, but a big personality and probably what I'd call a kind of an aggressive salesman. So was just moved them fast and didn't necessarily care too much if there was some ramifications for a shoddy deal. He just moved things fast. And so when we bought the business and we knew we weren't getting him, the business was good, but there was a large chunk of the energy that the business had that we never purchased. And, so suddenly his network didn't really come to the business. It started to dissipate out into other players. So I've really learned, a massive learning exercise just about marketing and brand awareness. And, it's, our first year budget, we might have had, 25 grand, thinking that was just massively excessive for a marketing budget. This year's 100, and I'm still thinking that I probably haven't hit the mark yet. So,
yeah.
it's
And yeah, so 30 years ago when you and I started out, marketing was a necessary evil, right? But it was very traditional in its execution. So what I mean by that is when you were making a marketing plan, it was all depending on the type of business that you were working in. There was always little piece of radio, little piece of press. If you were big enough, there might have been some more radio and maybe some TV. But the nature of marketing today has changed completely, and you're really at the heart of it there. So what does your marketing plan look like at the moment?
I think for the first year, it was just literally throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing what stuck and worked. We did, newspaper advertising. We did wall planners. We did a bit of Google, a bit of Facebook. We did a little bit of radio. We did lots of rural shows. There's a national annual show here called the Field Days, which we go to. In fact, our site is literally backed up hard and behind the Irish tent that represents a lot of Irish business in New Zealand that are exporting to here. So we do a lot of those shows, and so we've really spent the first year, and we also had the brand that we bought was really quite old school and didn't work. So we kind of had to freshen up the brand and try and find our voice, and we'll try and work out who the market was, which was what we have worked out is it's anybody, which makes it quite challenging because how do you get your message right to that? But um, I think what we've done, and I probably now really start to see just how powerful the new modern um, platforms are. Um, the Google, Meta, YouTube, LinkedIn. I even went through a session the other day and they're telling me Gmail is a good platform. And how is Gmail a good platform? But apparently it's a good platform to be marketing with. We implemented a CRM called HubSpot. So, we're able to now do electronic, digital marketing and nurturing and all these kinds of things with all our database of customers and stuff. So I think probably what I'm learning with those ones is the good thing about the digital stuff is you really can measure your conversions. And ultimately, really the only thing I really care about is what we're spending per container sold. And at the start with the big marketing companies who tell you it's all about impressions. And you get excited, oh shit, we've had 97, excuse the French, we've had 97,000 impressions on a campaign, this is done really well. And I go, but I only sold one container out of it. So, 97,000 impressions means jack, you want to,
Yeah, yeah,
you,
yeah.
so I definitely think it's a science nowadays. There's some incredible data there. I think there's a heck of a lot of automations. I think AI's got a role to play in all of this. So I think at the moment I'm probably starting to hone the marketing strategy down to really Meta and Google, YouTube, LinkedIn. I've it pains me to say it, but I'm probably going to spend less and less with the local media because I just can't see what we're getting for it. It's
Yeah.
I don't feel as though I should move away from it because I feel you still have to look real. And so seeing your brand, it's all about familiarization of your brand a bit too. So, we've kind of got a bit of an idea that we want to be one of the three really recognizable brands in the container space. And we're very wary of the fact that no one thinks about containers at all. They're not a want. They're not a luxury good. They're not desirable. They're just simply a need on the day that you need one. So you've run out of storage. What am I going to do? A container might be a good way. Who am I going to go to? And we just have to be, one of those recognizable brands. Who are those guys? Oh, container space. That's right. Bright Orange. We'll give them a ring. And then they've got to get that really strong sense of trust in you fast. You've got to be able to respond quickly. One thing we've really learned is people still do business with people. So the quicker we can get onto the phone, get the connect, or physically be in front of that person and shake hands and talk, the more likely we are to win the deal. But
Mhm.
the power of all that automation in the background, HubSpot working well and everything landing in the right place means we can be really efficient with everything in the background so that when we get our chance to talk to that customer, you can pounce really. And there's not a lot of stretch in the market. So, we lost 2 deals today for $120 Kiwi. Nothing,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just occurred to me on the marketing discussion that 30 years ago there used to be a phrase going around that 50% of your marketing budget works for you and 50% doesn't work for you. You just don't know which 50% is working and which 50% doesn't
yeah,
work. So it seems to me that that's the key difference between modern marketing through LinkedIn and so on, is
yeah.
that you're able to track where your sales are coming from, and that's the key difference, right?
Yeah, and I would say like we've been using HubSpot now for a year, and we use it 100% of the time, and we're probably only using 5% of its capability. The 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 more I get into it, the more I know we don't know, and the more I know that we can, really drive it hard still. So when you asked before, what's the economy like at the moment? It is slow, but I feel like we've really upped the ante. I kind of see an opportunity to the pie has shrunk in New Zealand. There's just less dollars floating around, so the pie shrunk. Doesn't matter if it's containers or plumbing or building or anything. There's just less dollars being spent. But in our particular market, it's certainly got slower. So I think it's the perfect opportunity right now to grow our market share. And we haven't done that through price. We've retained our pricing, so we are losing a little bit. To that guy today, like for $150 a container, I'm just sort of saying, well, we don't need to drop because we're generating enough inquiry. Let's just hold our line. We're getting the sales at our price, but what we are doing is we're just upping the ante on brand awareness. Yeah, and I was talking to my son about it not long ago, and he said, yeah, you're trying to do two things, Dad, with your marketing. You're trying to blind the enlightened, which is, getting your brand in front of these guys all the day, but you're also trying to enlighten the blind, so get people that haven't thought about containers as a solution. So, we're trying to make those that are thinking containers think of container space, and those that are doing something but don't know what to do it with, think of a container and find us. So, yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's saturation yet. I definitely see I could dominate the market with a aggressive marketing plan, which may yet come. We're not there yet, just because I'm too nervous to do it, and when we haven't quite got our ducks in a row. But I don't think what I can see in any really good market, the consumer always likes choice. And they also like to know and recognise a couple of brands within that, so they feel confidence about who they're buying with. And if I looked at the space that we operate in, there's no real one known brand at the moment. It's not really, it's a little bit of a Wild West kind of scenario. So I think there's an
Yeah.
opportunity for us, and I'd like to think one or two of the other brands have got the same strategy, because I'd be, well, even if we go early and try and get there another couple of followers, I think the market will be better if there's two or three, good, strong, recognisable brands in there, and then we'll be away.
Yeah, the other thing that you're doing, which is very obvious, is that you are building your own personal brand as the face of the business, and you're driving the brand recognition through building your own personal brand. So I hope I've described that correctly, but that's what it seems like to me. Tell me about that journey. Was that an interesting decision to make, and has it been an interesting road to take for you?
Yeah, it has been interesting because it wasn't what I wanted to do. In fact, I was determined not to do it. And mainly when I looked at the business when we bought it, the previous owner and the company, both brands were very much linked into one. And so it was really his show, rather than about the business. And I'm always about the team and the business as a whole. And I'm off. We've got a big team. There's 8 of us, and my role is to own the risk, really, and to to be the fall guy if it needs to be in different situations. But collectively, it's all of our brand. But what I did realize is I couldn't force the other guys to be the guys out there doing it. If I'm not prepared to do it, then why should I expect them to do it? And so I kind of started to go, okay, well, I can see this is going to have to be me. But I also realized too that, and it was probably a little bit of maturity, I suppose, when I recognized that we did actually have a sales business, is that, I'm the managing director. I've obviously invested in it. It's my job. I've got to go up and I've got to do what I have to do it. And so once I got my head around that it's actually my duty and obligations to do this, I've been doing it. And so I'm still not comfortable doing it, but I know it's just what I have to do, and probably going to lean into it. And if I can do that, then I'm hoping that the rest of our team are also comfortable to do it. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the brand. I also want it to be about the people that we do business with, and whether it's a customer or supplier. And part of really what we're focused on is celebrating who we work with, the communities that we're in. And so there is a bit of recognition for me in there as well. But I'm not trying to turn it into me. I tend to get, when I'm saying something, it's more about my excitement for someone else's success rather than our success. So when I'm not only selling containers, I'm normally selling cool stories, whether it's the field days and what it does for the New Zealand economy, or it's I think that's where my brand's growing a wee bit, in the fact that we're not, people are recognizing container space not because we're not ramming containers down their throat, we're more, that's the strategy. I think that's hoping that sort of separates us from the competition a wee bit.
Yeah. And as the market tightens and contracts a little bit, you're doing a lot of work, yeah, on brand building. You're doing a lot of work on your HubSpot and all the back end systems and processes and so on. Presumably, all of your competitors are going through a similar tough time. Are you hoping and banking on the fact that there will be some casualties in that market and you'll be well poised to go pick up some opportunities when the business starts to emerge, when the economy starts to emerge out of this, right?
Yeah. So I've invested into a couple of databases that, I wouldn't have normally have done, thinking that, is there any value there? But really to do some outbound calling. So, our team are pretty focused just at dealing with the inbound, which we tend to generate through, advertising and bits and pieces. But um, with the economy, I'm pretty sure we'll start to lift later in the year. And a lot of those businesses that have historically hired containers have got no containers, and they're kind of wide open again for anyone. So again, there's no emotional attachment to who you used to hire your containers from. But there is one, relatively big brand that has done a good job in the past at signing up a whole lot of contracts. They make it relatively difficult for businesses to do business with. So we're going in there at the moment, just getting our brand in front, getting that familiarity there. We're using LinkedIn and a whole lot of stuff just to build that B2B kind of, I suppose, just so they've got comfort in us that we're a real brand, that they recognize us, they can see we're easy to do business with. And when they're ready to go, at the very least, we're in their phone book, and if they go to we had a classic just the other day, a large company, that sort of a promotions company that works with, a massive international brand, sort of looking after their shows, I suppose, is what this business does. It sort of looks after when there's a big event on and this company's sponsoring the event. Well, they historically deal with this big company, and this big company wanted them just to simply paint the containers the color of the big international corporate. And it was just too tough. And so I still to this day don't really know how they actually found us, whether it was on Google or not, but they rang and I was like, yeah, of course we can paint it bright red. And we're just sort of saying with this large company that had historically used one of the big competitors, and when they asked them, could they paint these containers the bright red of the corporate customer, they were like, no, that was too difficult, and they managed to track us down, and I was like, of course we can. So we did that, and we've I just think it's been that saying yes, being easy to deal with, probably taking a little bit of risk, which is, probably one of my shortfalls. But, I thought it was a relative safe bet, really. But, like that's what we're doing at the moment. Whilst the economy's slowing back, we're just getting ourselves in front of different entities that we normally haven't been in front of, and just making sure that our numbers in their phone book and our emails in their, address book, and they're familiar with the brand, and they've seen me talk some stuff around the place, and they just trust us to do it. So yeah, while the market's slow, we're absolutely going hard on trying to prepare ourselves for when the economy gets bigger, and I'd like to think that we will benefit it there. So at the moment, the spend per container sale is higher than I'd like it,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's an investment right now.
If you were hiring a marketing manager or somebody to assist with marketing, will you stick to the tried and trusted traditional route of interviewing locally and having somebody based in your office or somebody based in the general locality and maybe working from home? Or are you looking at different options for shall we say, outsourcing your marketing?
Yeah, so I had a view that I felt one entity needed to do all of it, and I think I think now there's this kind of three, in my mind, my simplistic mind. I think there's three sort of tranches to that marketing side of thing. I think one is just the straight social media, not so much the advertising on social media, but just your social media, and all that. And I think that's a real discipline, and I think you got to be focused on it and motivated by it. People watching videos more in reels on the different channels. I think you've got to, and I think what the market are wanting to see you there is around who we are as people, and what our morals and ethics are like, and do we just like them? Do we trust them? Are they cool? So I think that's one whole side of marketing nowadays, which can't be underestimated. And then the second part, I think, is in and around SEO, um, Google, Bing. It's the paid advertising. I think it's AI and that too is kind of, what happens. We're there now. Really, not many people are doing it, but you can literally, give me a price for a container within 10 k's of my location, or give me the best container price within 10k. Yeah, that's it. The way for people to find what they want is just going to change dramatically. So I think you have to really have a really good digital footprint now, so that AI, whatever way they're doing it, has many different ways that they can find you. Um, and then I think the third part to that is really just that, for us, is just around nurturing and electronic direct emailings with our. I think we're probably close to 10,000 contacts on our database that we don't do anything with. We've got the ultimate tool to do something with, and we don't. So, I think they're three quite distinctly different disciplines, I think, in my mind. And you've also, across that, you really want to make sure you kind of got a brand champion, someone that understands me and also our team and what our values are and who we are and what kind of business we want to be, and they can really ensure that that message comes across. So we're not highly polished. We're probably a little bit rough and ready, and it possibly works for us because I'm not a shiny, person. So I think, so someone's also got to get us. But I think to find a business for us that does everything, it's going to be quite hard. So I'm talking to one business based in Australia. I just hooked up with a business today. They have a call with that's based in the States. I just looked at some stuff out of the Philippines. I've talked to a couple of local people. I think, and certainly got my eyes wide open to how we do it. I think it'll be hard to do it overseas from a time perspective, from the social media bits and pieces, and maybe not necessarily getting the feel. But that's not to say a lot of it we can't do overseas. So, there's a lot of automations there. Yeah, I'm very much open to. I won't be employing someone. I just don't think it'd be really hard to find a person that can cover all that. And I think it's such a space you got to focus on now. I think it's too risky to bring it in house. It's not
Yeah.
to say it's going to be tough to get the right person. I'm going to have to trust them. The friend of mine that's been doing it's been really, really good, excellent. We're probably putting too much pressure on her now. We just need more of it. And it's she's a mum, and this is our side hustle, and we're probably starting to push her into it no longer being fun a bit. So hence I'm sort of out there looking for it at the moment, but it's critical.
Yeah. The reason you're involved in container space is because the opportunity arose when you were, shall we say, on the lookout for an opportunity. Is that a nice way of putting it?
Yeah, yeah.
Really, really
But-
keen to
but-
know about your last business venture. What happened and where did it leave you?
Yeah, so my last business venture was the culmination of probably my working career from when I came back from the good old Kiwi OE back in
Overseas experience,
1990.
yeah.
Yeah. So like most of us Antipodeans, we all travel because we're so far away from anywhere. We want to go and see the world. So I lived in the UK for a couple of years, nearly 3 years, and came back here and came back to the dairy farm, family farm, and over the space of the next 25, 30 years, however long it was, ended up in lots of different ventures. But my last one, which was a transport company, which was a business dear to my heart. It was, started, it got too tough. And we had probably 2 years of some significantly tough challenges after some really good successes. And, all the equity and gains that we'd made, we ate up really fast. And I suddenly found myself in a position where I had to make the ultimate tough call. And, having found myself lying in fetal position on the floor, rocking, going, the sky's falling. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And you obviously go to some pretty dark spaces when you're thinking about that. But ultimately, I made the decision that um, needed to place the business into voluntary liquidation, which was just the toughest decision I think you can make, and mainly because pride's in the way of making that decision. It's I knew it was the right thing to do. And the next day, once I'd signed all the papers and we started the liquidation process at 6 o'clock in the morning when all the drivers were coming to work and pulled them all in, and they're all wondering what's going on. We had to break the news that we're placing the business into voluntary liquidation. But in all honesty, after that meeting, the weight lifted off my shoulders. I was still in a massive amount of work, and there was a lot more pain to come. But I absolutely knew I'd done the right thing.
Yeah.
So
Just want to step back a little bit, Nick, and kind of spell this out a little bit. So you had a fleet of trucks on the road, right?
yeah, so
And you mentioned that the costs started to outweigh the income. Not to
yeah.
be oversimplistic about it, but can you just give us a picture of what the business looked like at that stage?
I suppose when I came back from overseas, went farming. Dairy farming, family farm, and I'd always had a little bit of a diesel problem, so I liked driving trucks and bits and pieces. It probably wasn't a little problem; it was a problem. And so I was farming. I ended up buying a truck, and then over the next few years, that really grew into quite a large venture. And our biggest venture that we had was where I met Nick with the tankers, and on various parts of that journey all the way through, we sold some of these businesses, and we did really well out of them. They were good businesses, and went well. And so in the end, I had one business of the tanker fleets, the sort of truck fleets left, which was my original sort of business. And really what happened is we'd probably thrown all of our eggs into one basket with one really large contract. We did it exceptionally well. I didn't see any writing on the wall to say that we were going to lose that contract. And we lost that contract, which
Yeah,
that hurt hard, and I could not shrink fast enough. It took us a long time to get rid of staff. It took us a long time to get rid of gear. And so we had a horrible period of maybe a year trying to right size. So the right sizing hurt. And then, actually, just before that happened, that large customer also changed their payment terms to 90-day payment terms. So going into losing the contract a year before that, we'd suddenly come into massive cash flow challenges of trying to fund 90-day payment terms, which was just brutal. And we were sort of getting up to $1 million out over 90 days, which, for a small family-owned business was tough. We then lost that customer. I then looked to replace that customer with a couple of others, trying to, not make the same fatal mistake of having all eggs in one basket. Obviously, and we replaced those. We came up with some really good contracts. Obviously, the balance sheet was nowhere near as good as it had been because we'd been smacked around through for a whole lot of reasons. And then one of the contracts where we took over and we started was a really good contract. The challenge was we bought some brand new gear for it, which was the right gear for the job. It was the only machine like it in the country at the time, and COVID hit, and we had a massive breakdown with that machine, which was Italian. And at that stage, Italy was in lockdown, massive lockdown, and we could not get parts for this machine. I had contractual obligations to deliver on that contract. Our main bit of kit was broken down, and so I had to find replacements. So we ended up having to hire gear, and we just started getting into a quite quick down slope of making decisions to cover other positions, and the margins that we would have been making, we weren't making. In fact, we were giving away margin because I was having to pay, like with the hire gear, because we were paying short-term hire, thinking that the machine would be going any day, 7 months later, any day. And then the final straw was actually we had a young bloke work for us who decided to sabotage some equipment, and that cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yeah, it just suddenly the winds changed, and at that stage I had with wife Hillary and I've got 3 kids, and um, you're looking at your life and your family, and you start to make decisions. Actually, what's the most important things I need to be focusing right now? And I suddenly, the weight of looking after staff and all these other bits and pieces. I go, I don't have the wherewithal. I've used up the equity that we'd created, and like pride probably stopped me doing it maybe a year earlier than I should have. I probably
So
would have been a bit
you
better.
saw the writing on the wall a long time out, did you?
I think in hindsight, you know, I probably had the opportunity. I had the opportunity to sell that business, and I didn't take it because I didn't know what my purpose in life would be at that stage. I think I was 46, 47, whatever I was at the stage, and you know, I got the opportunity to sell that business when we lost that contract. The guys that took the contract of us wanted to buy the business, but my ego might have got in the way. I just didn't know my purpose. Me and the business were very quite intertwined, and I didn't know who I was without it. So I thought I could carry on, you know. So looking
That's great.
back,
That's really interesting because most people say that they don't know what to expect because the business and the person are so intertwined. The business doesn't know who it is without the owner. But in your case, you're saying it's the opposite. You didn't know who you were without your business.
I think so. Yeah, just kind of
Wow.
what's my place in the world. And ultimately, as much as when I left school, went to university, I didn't necessarily finish university on the right side with a degree. I take early retirement. So, I'd sort of bumbled my way, traveled, and I've done lots of different things. I've done some really cool things, but I didn't believe in myself at all. When the business, I lacked massive lack of confidence, which would have surprised a lot of people. Not that I'm a very confident person, but I can hold my own. And yeah, I didn't know what my place in the world was, so I probably held on to it, and scrambled for position a bit, and found some good solutions with these other contracts. But we didn't need any catastrophes when we lost that contract, and we kind of had to pretty quickly, and just gazumped us, and so it was a
So you went
hard hit.
from a lifestyle point of view, you went from having everything you needed, whatever you want, you just go do it, go get it, to what?
So we probably never had that. We'd always worked hard and went show out. I Someone would say might be, but I wasn't. We kept a pretty private sort of life. We went out there doing everything and traveling and doing a lot of stuff. We just really enjoyed our family life and kids and doing things with the kids. So I suppose ultimately, I think because I took ownership of it, nothing actually changed. We had a lovely property. We sold that. Our kids were all going to a good school. We managed to keep them at the good school through some hard work. So when I think about it, there's a few things I'm really proud of that experience, and I think one is that my marriage is as good as it's ever been, and I certainly know a few business owners that go through this journey that just absolutely disintegrates their personal life. So my family and my kids are still there. We made some strategic decisions to, help the financial situation with some of the debts that we had from closing the business. So, we sold our property and, moved. But ultimately, we still really tied as a family. One of the really proud things I have is that we actually sold the business to another business, but we placed it into voluntary liquidation, so that what ultimately happens, all our staff kept their roles. So every single not one employee lost lost a role or any of their entitlements, holiday pay or anything like that. Everyone, all the employees kept their roles. All of our contracts rolled straight over to the next day, so not one of our contracts fell over. Um, all of our local debtors that I had managed to secure them, but they needed. So we came away with no ramifications on us. Long term, there's had to have 3 years where I couldn't do much personally myself, but um, we weren't put into bankruptcy, or we didn't really lose anything. We made some hard decisions to re-situate ourselves, but to ensure that I still had my family, still had a roof over our head. It was a fascinating experience. I had some some people wanted to kick me. I had some detractors out there that took great pleasure at throwing some stones. That was quite hard to take. But I had some phenomenal words of support as well from people that I'd helped in my life and their life with adverse periods that really, brought tears to me, when they rang me to pass on their deepest thoughts. It was an incredible experience. So it's not an experience I'd recommend to anybody. But I feel like it's been an amazing experience for me because I owned it. I never shied from it. The liquidator that we dealt with, said to me at the end of it when it was finally wound up, he said, "That's the best one I've ever done, Nick," because most guys like you, want to hide all the toys and run around, and you fronted up on everything and owned it. And I'm proud of it. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't want to do it again. I don't talk loudly about it, and I haven't. It doesn't sit on my shoulders with a big chip. That's another one of those. I think it's how you walk through doors, isn't it? And that door, I had no choice with that door. I had to walk through it, and I I wanted to hold myself well walking through that door and own those steps. So yeah.
And when you're in that situation at what must seem like a rock bottom, um, is it the things that Maslow talked about? Is it food, shelter, security? Are they the most important things in the whole world? Are they the only things in the whole world that matter?
Goes there real quick. Yep. Shelter, roof over your head. Um, yep. Absolutely. It's a really raw. You feel very exposed. So it's quite a raw feeling. Yep. But it's absolutely there. Yep. It's humanity at its rawest is right there when you've got to make some real survival decisions around, well, and protecting. It's
I was going to say, what do you say to your kids?
it wasn't easy, but again, just sat the three of them down. I think eldest at that stage was 14. Youngest would have been 10. Yes, we had probably at the stage 14, 12, and 10. May have even been 15, into 11, somewhere around that stage. They, we just had to, Hillary and I just had to sit there and just say, look, guys, we're about to go through some stuff here. Could be in the news, could be, could get some phone calls. There could be a whole lot of things happening. You're going to get people at school asking you, you're going to have people, wanting to laugh at you. There's going to be a whole lot of stuff. So we just sat down with them and just had a really honest conversation with them. And, I have no doubt, I can't remember it now, but I have no doubt I was in tears saying it. But, it was a humbling moment. But, they, as a family, you just galvanised, don't you? And they did. They were, amazing support for me. Or everyone, certainly there was days there where you virtually had to be lifted up off the floor. You're a very heavy weight. Some pretty deep, dark thoughts go through your head. But I think once I'd made the decision about what needed to do, I never really looked back.
Yeah.
Um,
And when mom and dad are really successful, kids look at their parents and they go, I don't really give a shit about how successful they are. dad's not a rocket scientist in my eyes. He's just dad, and mom is not a Harvard professor in my eyes. She's
Yeah,
just mom.
yeah.
Conversely, when things are down, do kids have the same impression? Things are bad, but in the end of the day, mom and dad are just mom and dad.
Yeah, and I think you'd be surprised how strong kids are and how much, you know, uh, I'd look back and think that I probably leaned on their shoulders, or, used their shoulder to cry on,
No,
metaphorically. A lot kids are really, really quite a powerful, and a lot more intuitive, and a lot more in touch with what's going on, and they're 100%, 100% there for you. There's nothing there. So yeah, they were amazing. And I think, um, in all years, I've done some very interesting things, and the kids have seen me in different situations, really seeing me challenge myself, mentally in different stages. So, I think the kids knew that they'd seen me tough it out before, and I took on a physical challenge, and they really saw me tough it out, and so I think they kind of knew that, you know, I'd tough this out and I'd get us through. Mm.
yeah. What did you notice about your friends, your social circles, your business circles? You said you keep a fairly low key existence, but what did you notice about those interactions and those people?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think overwhelmingly had the support, um, again, because we owned it and didn't, we cut the cloth afterwards to suit, rather than pretending nothing needed to be cut. So I think our friends were really good. Um, with some of the people I'd done business with that I thought were, friends, weren't necessarily so when they weren't earning a dollar out of me anymore. That was quite interesting. Um, and some people have taken a while to, you know, reset it back to normal, but I've just remained me, I suppose, and who I am and how I do things, and over time, people have, say they've forgotten, but certainly accepted. And I think, like it's actually, it's it's business. Business is the toughest sport of all, and sometimes, um, you know, circumstances, you don't make the right decisions, and suddenly you're in a different position. Um, so and I think, like in the States, and you'd know this from when you worked in American businesses, is they're not proud of those kind of things, but they own it as, part of the journey. Um, that there are some good learnings from, and that's kind of how I look at it now. Is that there are some really good learnings from it. I certainly apply, a lot of those learnings into this business. You're a lot wiser, you know, and so, I'm pretty happy imparting those learnings. I don't force it on anyone, but I'm always happy to, you
Yeah.
know,
And how did you maintain sanity through all of this? I mean, yourself personally, was there a guiding light? Was there a North Star that you were traveling towards? Was there a set of values that you leaned on that you learned as a kid? Was it pure bloody mindedness that got you through, or was it the humility that you obviously have? Or was it simply the fact that you, in your own words, owned it? Was that the most significant factor in you coming through this healthily?
yeah, I certainly, bumbled along for probably 2 years, not really sure of, you know, where do I go, because I'd always been in business for myself, whether it was farming or with the trucks. And so, and at one point with the trucks, we had 180 staff, so it was a big entity, and, um, to suddenly have no one, reporting to you, you're working for someone else. Um, yeah, it was a tough period. I don't think I had a North Star. I think this thing I did it was a cycling challenge that I did a few years ago. That I think I know my head is really tough. I've taken it there, so I kind of knew I've got that, and that I know it can handle some tough days. So I kind of know that's there. Um, and yeah, it was just time, and it was friends, and it was just slowing down. And, um, it was just one day at a time. And again, we had to get a job. You're thinking about, paying a mortgage and keeping the roof over the head, and, um, everyone food at the table. Just brought it back to its simplistic, and, didn't dream of grandeur or anything like that. Just sort of focused on the small things. One of the things that, I've started to do through that period, which I still do today, is I get up early and I'd go for, a good hour, 2 hour, 2.5 hour walk. That just allows me and my brain to find its own center for the day. And, that you're not going to get hammered by the phone. And, like you can get trapped in your own thoughts pretty quick. And I think physical exercise, and because it's not strenuous, it's just going for a walk, but that air through the lungs and just that time on my own, and could be a podcast or it could be something like that. Normally, it has got me through well. And I'll continue to do that because, when your mind starts going too fast, and sometimes you just got to let it all just slow down again, and just smell the roses, so to speak. I think that's how I've got through it. Is it just one day at a time, and you know I've got time.
Yeah. I'm interested to know if there was a turning point, if there was a moment in time where you took that first step back up the ladder on the road back, or was it a gradual thing, or was there an event or a series of events that led you to the belief that, yep, things are going to be okay here? What was that process like?
Well, I think, interestingly enough, it was simply, um, a really good friend of mine, Pete, who, I'd been, in my previous transport business, when we had large fleet. I worked closely with him and ended up selling, our largest business through to his business. Him and I had been really close friends, through that period of time, and, we'd become good mates through that period of time. And not that we had much to do with each other, but always just sort of, checked in with each other to see how each other were and what was happening in each other's lives. And um, yeah, he'd had some challenges in his own life, and I'd check in with him just to see, how he was going and all those sorts of things. And then when this happened, to us, Pete would check in with me to see how I was. Um, and then out of the blue, one day he goes, I've always really, I'd love to do business, go into business with you again, Nick. And he's retired. He goes, I'd really would love to do something with you again. We worked well together, and I trust you, and I know you trust me. I've come across a business that's for sale, which you'd be keen, to come in with me on it. And that was probably the catalyst. Really was I'd been really bumbling along, going, what am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? And he probably identified it and said, right,
And this was container space.
it's a container space here. So I'm incredibly, um, lucky and blessed, I suppose, to be in that position. But I think it's also because of who I am and how I am, and I'm not, karma and all those sort of things are interesting concepts. But I think, if you surround yourself with good people and you do good things for people, those good things, come back to you in different ways. And, um, I'm a firm believer in, doing good things for people with no strings. And I think that's, I think that's possibly what's helped in the situation, was that we were good friends, and there was never any strings attached for him and I. We were just there for each other if we needed it. And, I think Pete thought, I needed some support. So, it was, and that really was what got me going again. So we're 50-50 owners in the business, and Pete's, he's retired, but he backs us 100% to get on and do it. And him and his wife have some strong sort of philanthropic views around their support for some large community organisations. So this business helps them support those businesses. So it's a really nice feeling that, part of, the opportunity that I've been given for Pete, I help enable their ongoing support for what they like to do. So it's a nice,
Symbiotic
it feels
relationship.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
you hear about people in these situations that attract an angel investor or a wealthy relative comes along to dig them out financially, or something unexpected happens out of the blue. It sounds to me like this partnership with Pete was none of the above. It sounds like what actually was happening here was that you had a similar set of values, and those values were very long standing in both of your lives, and those values came together and you trusted each other implicitly, and that's what the catalyst was, rather than him being nice to you.
I think so. Yeah, yep, yep. And I experienced that quite a bit, you know, post the collapse or the liquidation of the business. Was that quite a few people that had that no strings attached, with just a genuine respect for that person and what they did and how they do it and all those kind of things, offered some remarkable support for Hillary and I. So, and I'd absolutely do that for anyone as well. It's I think that's what we're all here for too. Ultimately, is to help and support each other when and where you can, sort of thing. And it's Pete and I, it's just a genuine respect for each other and enjoyment of each other's company. We, it's a business. He's a shareholder in a really successful business, and it's got to be successful through his discipline and hard work. So I'm lucky that I also, get to learn, some of the way his brain thinks as well. He's got a lot to offer, and I'm lucky to get to learn some of that stuff. So not only have I got my own learning, so I've got a couple of good people around me to learn more from. So no, it goes really well.
Last question. You're 20 years old again, right? And you're still trying to work out who owns the PAV. And for those who are not tuned into what we're talking about here, we're talking about pavlova, because over very many years now, there's been a long-standing argument as to who invented the pavlova. Was it New Zealand or was it Australia? And it's still one of the biggest political sticking points between the two countries, jokingly. So you're back, you're working through all those important things, and you're looking at your future business self or your future self. What single piece of advice would you give the 20-year-old Nick Walker as he sets out on his journey again?
I think it would be back yourself. I think I had a whether I put it on myself or I don't know, but I felt there was an obligation to do a whole lot of things as the eldest son on a family farm. There was a lot of things that I did make decisions making. I thought too that were either an obligation or to make someone else happy. So I like all 20-year-olds at the time, probably my brain probably didn't mature till I was probably 30. I there was a lot of things that I wish or wanted to do at that stage that I didn't. I didn't pursue it because I felt like I needed um, to do the right thing. So I've got a 20-year-old son now, and not that I absolutely, his life is absolutely his life, and he's what he's doing. But I'm certainly have made it really sure that he doesn't have a sense of having to follow a path or do anything. It's just simply to be there. And I think as a 20-year-old, I think that's what I'd want, I suppose, is the support, just the simple, I'm there if you need me kind of support around me, rather than the, why are you doing that, kind of sort of things. So as a 20-year-old, I'm big on, um, you know, um, I think it's pretty hard at 20 to know exactly what you're doing in life. My son is lucky that he's, found his dream, and he's really passionate about it. Me as a 20-year-old, I was all over the show. I was at Lincoln University, which is an ag college, learning how to be farming, wanting to be truck drivers, playing rugby poorly and having the odd beer. And it was great fun. Wouldn't change that for anything. It was an awesome period, but I followed the path that I felt obligated to follow, and I think I'm not sure if I would know anything different, but I'd just be hoping as if I was a 20-year-old that I'd be more asking harder questions of my parents, probably to make sure that they provided me the support I needed, not what they thought I needed. Maybe I think that's probably the difference between the way I look at it back at now. That's
Okay,
answering that question, Nick. I'm not sure.
it's great. Well, Nick, I don't mind telling you that I've been a long time supporter, and you've been a huge inspiration to me over very many years now. I remember very clearly the first time we met. It was in a transport office, and I was in the shit, and you were very willing to listen in a non-judgmental way and give me some help and advice on where I should be going and what I should be doing, and I appreciate that to this day. And your story is remarkable. Whether you like to admit it or not, your story is inspirational also. And I really want to thank you for coming on the show today, because I know that your words and your story are going to inspire a lot more people. So very best wishes to you, and look forward to staying in touch a lot over the coming days and months and years. And thanks again for joining us. Awesome.
Thanks, Nick, and can't wait to come back across and visit the Emerald Isle again. It's an awesome place. Love it.
Always welcome. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.